was thick with the scent of lavender and betrayal, as his lips claimed mine, urgent and unyielding. Beneath the shadowed archway of my sprawling Tuscan villa, I, Margaret Holloway, at 59, stood trembling, my hands clutching the lapels of Julian's linen shirt, his 27-year-old frame pressing me against the cool stone. The moonlight spilled through the olive trees, illuminating the silver streaks in my auburn hair and the fire in his hazel eyes. My heart raced, a wild thing caged after years of neglect. As the taste of red wine lingered on his tongue, a stolen sip from the glass I'd abandoned on the terrace. My husband, Victor, was upstairs, likely lost in his ledgers, oblivious to the scandal unfolding below. This kiss, this reckless plunge into desire, was a line crossed, a marriage shattered. And yet, as Julian's hands slid to my hips, I felt alive, dangerously, gloriously alive. But then a shadow moved at the window, and a gasp cut through the night. I pulled back, my breath hitching, my emerald necklace glinting, as I turned to see Victor's silhouette. His face, a mask of disbelief. The world tilted, and I knew the life I'd built was crumbling. All because of a boy half my age, who'd ignited a flame I couldn't extinguish. I stumbled back, my satin robe slipping from one shoulder, as Julian whispered, "Margaret, His voice broke, raw with emotion. But I raised a hand, my mind a whirlwind of panic and exhilaration. Victor's footsteps echoed on the marble stairs, each one a hammer blow to my conscience, and I straightened, smoothing my hair with trembling fingers. Julian melted into the shadows, his presence a lingering heat against my skin. As I turned to face my husband, "Victor," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "you're awake." His eyes, usually so distant, burned with a fury I'd never seen, and the air between us crackled with the weight of my betrayal. This wasn't how it was meant to be. At 59, I was a woman of elegance and poise, the matriarch of Holloway Vineyards, a name synonymous with Tuscany's finest wines. Victor, my husband of 35 years, had given me this villa, its terraced gardens cascading down to the valley, its frescoed walls a testament to our wealth. But he'd also given me solitude, a cold, unyielding companion that had grown louder with each passing year. His obsession with the business had left me adrift, a trophy wife tending roses while he courted deals in Milan. My skin, still creamy despite the wrinkles at my eyes, and my figure, softened but graceful, had once turned heads, but now they went unnoticed by the man who shared my bed. I filled my days with charity dinners, overseeing the vineyard, and sipping wine on the terrace, but the emptiness gnawed at me, a silent scream I'd learned to ignore. Julian changed that. He arrived 6 months ago, the son of our Vintner, Luca, stepping in when his father fell ill. At first, he was just a shadow among the vines, tall, lean, with a mop of dark curls and a quiet confidence that set him apart. But as the seasons turned, I began to see him differently. The way his muscles rippled as he hefted barrels, the way his laughter danced on the breeze when he teased the workers, the way his gaze lingered on me during our brief exchanges. It stirred something dormant within me. I told myself it was admiration, a flicker of maternal warmth. But the truth was a wildfire, burning through the walls I'd built. It began innocently. One golden afternoon, I descended to the vineyard with a basket of figs, intending to share them with the crew. Julian turned, wiping sweat from his brow, and flashed a smile that made my pulse skip. "Signora Holloway," he said, his accent a melodic caress, taking a fig with a nod. "Call me Margaret," I corrected, surprised by the warmth in my voice. From that day, our interactions deepened. He'd bring me cuttings from the lavender fields, their purple heads fragrant and vibrant, placing them on the kitchen counter with a shy grin. "For you," he'd say, and I'd linger, inhaling their scent, imagining his hands tending them. The tension grew like a vine, twisting toward the sun. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, casting a rosy glow over the terrace, I found him polishing glasses in the wine cellar. His shirt was unbuttoned, revealing a chest bronzed by the Tuscan sun, and the sight sent a shiver through me. I should have turned away, but instead I called out, "Julian, need any help?" He looked up, his eyes catching mine, and for a moment the world narrowed to just us. He approached, handing me a glass, his fingers brushing mine with intent. The touch was a spark, and I felt my breath catch, my body awakening with a heat I'd buried for years. Over the next months, the boundaries blurred. He'd find excuses to be near, carrying crates to the kitchen, adjusting the shutters in the dining room, always with that knowing smile. I began anticipating his presence, the way his voice softened when he said my name, the way his gaze seemed to peel back the years and see me as more than Victor's wife. One rainy afternoon, I was curled up in the library, a novel forgotten in my lap, when he appeared with a tray of espresso and biscotti. "Thought you might need this," he said, setting it down, his eyes never leaving mine. The steam rose from the cup, mingling with the earthy scent of rain, and I felt a pang of something, longing, perhaps, or regret for what might have been. The psychology of it haunted me. I'd read studies on late life attraction, on the allure of youth, on the forbidden dynamics of power and desire. Was I seeking validation, a rebellion against Victor's neglect, or was it something deeper, a recognition of Julian's spirit, a mirror to the passion I'd lost? I told myself it was harmless, a fleeting fantasy, but my body disagreed. Every time he was near, my pulse quickened, my skin prickled with awareness. I caught myself watching him, memorizing the curve of his lips, the strength in his hands as he worked, the way his laughter lit up the room. The turning point came 3 weeks ago. Victor had called, his voice curt, to say he'd be in Rome for a month. Another merger demanded his attention. I hung up, the silence of the villa pressing in, and decided to walk the lavender fields. Julian was there, shirtless, his skin glistening as he weeded the rows. The sight stole my breath, And when he noticed me, he straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Margaret," he said, his voice low, "you look bellissima today." The compliment, so bold yet so tender, unraveled me. I stepped closer, the damp earth staining my sandals, and murmured, "Thank you, Julian. You're too kind." His eyes darkened, and the space between us shrank, until I could feel the heat radiating from him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed in the vast bed I shared with Victor, the sheets cool against my skin, my mind replaying every moment with Julian. The villa was quiet, save for the distant rustle of leaves, and I rose, padding barefoot to the terrace for a glass of wine. As I poured, I heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, and turned to find Julian in the doorway, his curls damp from a shower, his chest bare. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, his voice a whisper in the moonlight. I nodded, my throat dry, and he stepped closer, the air thickening with tension. "Margaret," he said, his hand reaching for mine, "I've been wanting to tell you something." My heart pounded as his fingers closed around mine, warm and firm, and before I could stop myself, I leaned in, my lips brushing his. The kiss was tentative at first, a question, but when he responded, it deepened into something wild, something I couldn't control. We pulled apart, breathless, and he rested his forehead against mine. "This is crazy," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I know," he replied, his breath hot against my skin, "but I can't stop thinking about you." The confession hung between us, heavy with possibility, and I knew then that I was lost. Over the next days, we stole moments, his hand grazing mine as he passed me a tray, a lingering look across the dining room, a brush of his lips against my wrist when he brought me coffee. Each touch fueled the fire, each glance a promise of more. Tonight, though, had pushed us over the edge. I'd been preparing for a vineyard gala, slipping into a crimson gown that clung to my curves. My hair swept into an elegant updo, adorned with pearls. As I descended the stairs, Julian was there, polishing silverware, and our eyes met. The air shifted, charged with months of unspoken desire, and before I could think, he was crossing the room, his hands on my face, his lips on mine. The kiss was a storm, wild and unrestrained, and I melted into it, my hands clutching his shoulders. But the shadow at the window, Victor's gasp, forced us apart, leaving me shaken, exhilarated, and terrified. Now, as I stood there, smoothing my gown, I heard Victor's voice, low and dangerous. "Margaret, explain yourself." I turned, my heart pounding, and met his gaze. His face was a storm of rage and hurt, and I felt the weight of my actions crash down. Julian slipped out the back, his absence a void, as I faced my husband. "Victor," I began, my voice steady despite the chaos, "this isn't what it looks like." But the lie tasted bitter, and his laugh, cold and hollow, cut through me. "Don't insult me," he said, his eyes narrowing. "I've seen the way he looks at you, the way you've changed." The confrontation that followed was a tempest. Victor accused me of months of deceit, his voice rising with each revelation. How he'd noticed my distracted air, my late night walks, the way the villa seemed alive when he was gone. I countered with my own truths, the years of his neglect, the whispers of his affair with his assistant, Lucia, a woman half his age. The air grew thick with accusations, and in a moment of raw honesty, I admitted it. Yes, Victor, I've been with Julian, but you drove me to this. Your coldness, your absence. His face paled, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd loved broken by my words. The fallout was swift. Victor stormed out, vowing divorce, and I sank into a chair, the villa silent around me. Julian returned, his eyes filled with concern, and knelt beside me. Margaret, I'm so sorry, he whispered, his hand on mine. I looked at him, this young man who'd reawakened me, and felt a surge of resolve. No, I said, my voice firm. This is my choice. The divorce proceedings began, a public spectacle that rocked Tuscany's elite. Victor took the business, leaving me the villa and a modest settlement, a hollow victory tinged with freedom. Julian stayed, not as a vintner's son, but as my partner. The whispers followed, cheating wife, cradle robber. But his presence silenced them. We rebuilt the vineyard together, his hands in the soil, mine on the books, and the lavender fields bloomed brighter than ever. The psychology of our love, age defying norms, desire defying duty, taught me that passion knows no timeline. At 59, I'd found a second act, and as Julian kissed me under the Tuscan moon, the world felt whole again.